This is Block 7, The Greatest Generation, Section 7, The War in the Pacific with the Atomic Bomb. The possibilities of atomic power had been seen by scientists on both sides of the Atlantic in the 1930s. The Germans were working on it very, very hard, but many German scientists who were Jewish, most famously Einstein, left Germany rather than live under Hitler's anti-Jewish regime. Einstein especially was important. Einstein wrote a letter to President Roosevelt saying, you should do research on atomic weaponry because the Germans are, and we really can't let the Germans get there first. After the Germans had won such stunning successes in the early days of World War II, Roosevelt ordered the United States military to embark on a vast project to create a weapon that used the power of the atom to create massive, massive destruction. Congress gave a $2 billion blank check for what became known as the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project is the project that creates the atomic bomb. They work in utter secrecy. Very, very few people know everything about what is going on in laboratories and in universities and in bunkers all across America. But after working in secret for 4 years, on July the 16th, 1945, the United States had produced 3 atomic bombs. One of those 3 was exploded in a test in the New Mexico desert at Alamogordo, New Mexico in 1945. The explosion was a success, and they let President Truman know that it would work. Truman is informed of the success. Truman's informed that there's even such a project when he becomes president. He has no idea it exists when he's vice president. And Truman always said that he never in his mind doubted that he would use the bomb if it's necessary. At the Potsdam Conference, now here's an interesting picture. Oops, neat. Getting ahead of ourselves here. Here's the Potsdam Conference. The Potsdam Conference took place outside of Berlin after Germany had been defeated in July of 1945. And here's the new Big Three. Our only surviving Big Three person is Stalin. Here's Truman, who's taken over for Roosevelt. And Winston Churchill got voted out of office by the British electorate. He was replaced by Clement Attlee, of whom Churchill had one of the most wonderful lines, and lots of wonderful lines about Attlee. He was no fan. Churchill said of Attlee, he is a modest man with much to be modest about. But Britain is a democracy. The people thanked Churchill for his wartime service and said, goodbye, thank you very much, have a nice retirement. He got voted out of office, very unwillingly, by the way. But Truman is at Potsdam when the news of the atomic bomb gets to him, and he makes it clear in a memo to Japan that unless they surrender, they will be destroyed. He was not specific as to that there would be atomic bombs, but he said to Japan, if you do not surrender unconditionally, you will be destroyed. Another thing that was worked out at the Potsdam Conference was that the Soviet Union would join the war against Japan as soon as they could move their army from Europe to Asia. The Japanese, at this point, are beginning to have discussions about surrendering. And the United States knows that because we're reading Japan's diplomatic codes. What the Japanese want to do is use the Soviet Union as a mediator. But the Soviet Union is not interested in being a mediator because they want to gobble up some Japanese-held territory. Further, Japan showed no outward willingness that they were going to surrender. They were talking about it, but no decisions were being made, and there was no clear movement towards surrender whatsoever. The decision starts to come to President Truman's desk whether to use the bomb or not. And Truman had to weigh 2 things. Using this terrible new weapon on one hand, and an American invasion of Japan on the other. Early estimates for an American invasion of the Japanese home islands that was supposed to begin in November of 1945 would have killed well over 1 million, and probably closer to 2 to 4 million American soldiers. And the American government calculated that if 100,000 Japanese died defending Okinawa, how many tens of millions of Japanese would die defending the Japanese home islands? Plans were being made in Japan for little old ladies to be armed with sharp bamboo sticks so they could stab American soldiers when they weren't ready for it. Hundreds upon hundreds of kamikaze planes, kamikaze boats, kamikaze ships were being prepared to meet the Americans on the Japanese beaches. That's what Truman believed would happen if he invaded Japan with American troops. So when the scientists informed him that these weapons were ready, Truman did not hesitate. On the 6th of August, 1945, a B-29 carrying a single atomic bomb dropped it over the largely undamaged city of Hiroshima. Hiroshima was destroyed. 70,000 people were killed instantly, and tens of thousands more were missing and died later of the effects of radiation and radiation poisoning. Here's a picture of Hiroshima about a year after the atomic bombs hit. You can see that there is still pretty much nothing but a sea of utter destruction. That was on August 6th. On August 9th, the Japanese are attacked by the Soviets in Manchuria, and the Japanese think that they can put up a fight, and they're going to try to use that as leverage. But the Soviet army has been conditioned by years of fighting Hitler's army, and the Japanese army is not Hitler's army. Hitler's army was an efficient, modern army. By 1945, the Japanese army in Manchuria is not. The Japanese forces in Manchuria are rolled up easily by Soviet forces. August 9th is not a good day to be the Japanese leadership. In the morning, the Soviet Union attacked Manchuria. In the afternoon, a second atomic bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki, killed 80,000 people outright. On that day, the Japanese, or many Japanese, realized that defeat was inevitable. And then the debate turned. Do we all go down fighting, or do we surrender? And the Japanese cabinet was tied. They put it to a vote. They listened to all the arguments. Should we go on fighting even though it is hopeless, or should we surrender? And it was tied. 7 people in favor of fighting to the death, 7 people in favor of surrender. And they turned to the emperor himself, Hirohito. And Hirohito himself broke the tie. And he said, we must endure the unendurable and surrender. Hirohito asked for one condition. Now, the Americans had said unconditional surrender. Hirohito says we must have one condition. Japan will surrender as long as he could keep his throne. It is the oldest throne in the world, and the Japanese got a message to the Americans saying that they would surrender if Hirohito could stay on the throne. 4 days later, Truman and the Allies accepted that condition. And then all that was left to do was make it official. On the 2nd of September 1945, the official surrender of the Japanese took place aboard the battleship Missouri in Tokyo Harbor. MacArthur overlorded over the ceremony, and on the 2nd of September 1945, 6 years and 1 day after it had all begun, the guns fell silent, and the world celebrated.